I would like to introduce you to Tara Johnson. And listen up, take notes. Love y'all.
Bye, April. Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. I'm just going to open up my slides here. Hi, guys. Thank you for being here. From the bottom of my heart, it is so lovely to kick this thing off. Welcome to Conversion Control Summit. I'm thrilled and honored to be here. And I want to give a special thanks to April Weir. Of course, it's just going to be a love fest today. She's our fearless leader, and she has been putting so much hard work into these summits and bringing everyone together. I'm so proud to be here among a lot of amazing speakers. I hope many of you are going to stick around for the entire day. And this is such a great community, and I'm very excited to join you all. So about 10 years ago, I found myself in a pretty perplexing conversation with a client, or I guess I should say potential client. Up to that point, I'd done what I believed were all the right things. I ran through a thorough discovery session. I led a series of engaging conversations, and I did a ton of homework. I pulled together what I thought was a mind-blowing proposal and was ready to seal the deal. So certain that I was about to land my very first ever retainer marketing gig. So we sit down and we begin to dig into the proposal that I had spent hours upon hours editing and agonizing over. I mean, I'm sure you guys know the feeling. So anyway, we're nearing the end of that conversation, and then it happens. The CEO of the company locks eyes with me and says, "What do you think is the biggest marketing problem we face as a company?" I was stunned and blindsided, which shouldn't have been the case, but it was. I wasn't sure what to say, and I was stumbling over my words, likely filling the space with what I knew, right? The tech, the tools, sexy buzzwords that are essentially meaningless to the client. It wasn't a complete dumpster fire, but it was pretty close. Now, I'll never be 100% certain as to why I didn't get the gig. It could have been any number of things. I was a little too eager. I was fairly inexperienced and probably reeked of desperation. But for me, as I lay awake that night and nights to come, running that conversation over and over in my head, it always came down to my inability to answer that one question. Why didn't I know what their biggest problem was? What had I missed, and how could I do better next time? So this presentation today is kind of a love letter to my younger, naive self. This talk outlines everything I wish I had known back then, but managed to learn the hard way for those 10 plus years after. This talk is going to show you how to move others and inspire positive change. We're all here today to learn how to make more sales, to influence others, to move others in a particular direction. This move or shift could be physical. It might be emotional. Money might be changing hands, or perhaps collective priorities are being reorganized. Regardless of the goal, we're all working to shape situations and interactions into something positive and productive, landing a mutually beneficial agreement on both sides of the table. As business owners, freelancers, entrepreneurs, parents, and neighbors, we're all engaged in some form of sales each and every day. But for some of us to say we're in the business of selling, or to admit that we're a salesperson, just doesn't feel that great. Maybe it doesn't jive with our personality. I'm a pretty classic introvert, so in the past, I've always categorized selling as a purely extroverted activity. So for a super long time, I convinced myself that it just wasn't my thing. Some of us also lack confidence. We feel weird, we're shy. We've internalized this concept of sales as being pushy, aggressive, greedy, dishonest. You need to be a tough guy, a badass, kind of an asshole to close the deal. But this simply isn't true, right? This is a very dated, cartoon-like, or garbage pail kids-like version of what it means to sell. The fact is, this very special flavor of selling is becoming extinct. No longer is there an asymmetry to the information. Back in the day, salespeople held most of the proprietary information available, and the buyer had to rely on them to make the final decision. But over the last few decades, there's been a massive shift. As consumers, we don't rely on salespeople as being gatekeepers of that information. With the help of the internet, we can take complete control, read reviews, and run all kinds of research on our own. So what does this mean for us, the freelancers, small business owners, and consultants? It means that we need to leave the old salesperson trope behind and embrace what it really means to sell. Selling a product or service should never feel like you're pulling a fast one on somebody. To sell is to move people, to guide them in a mutually beneficial direction. The secret to moving people toward positive change happens through active listening and a few simple negotiation techniques. So before I dive in, I do want to list my two primary sources for this talk today. The first one being Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. And I do need to send a special thank you to Nev Harris for this recommendation. It's a mind-blowingly awesome book. And To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink, also fantastic and invaluable. So the first concept I want to touch on this morning is how to move from problem solving, which is what most of us are used to problem finding. So consider this statement. Your products and services are far more valuable when your prospect is mistaken, confused, or completely clueless about their true problem. Now, this can sound very counterintuitive at first, but think about it for just a second. As a consumer, when we truly know what our problem is, do we really need a salesperson or service provider to help us make that decision? No, we don't. We can go to the internet and make those decisions on our own. We read reviews, we do the research, we power through our linear decision-making process. And that salesperson no longer has the only set of keys to that information anymore. Most people, or in our case, prospective clients, are convinced that they already know what the problem is. So they're shopping, which means they're really bargain hunting. And this triggers what we've all come to know as a race to the bottom. So if you engage by being the loudest or the cheapest or the ballsiest, chances are you're going to shortchange yourself and set a precedent that will be hard to back out of later on. When a lead comes to you with an issue or pain point, you're actually in a very unique position to provide a valuable outside perspective. This also gives you an opportunity to uncover something that your prospect never even knew existed. In other words, you make a shift from being a problem solver to a problem finder. When you become that creative problem finder, your place of authority becomes heightened and you're easily differentiated from the pack. You become a different breed entirely, an empathic, collaborative breed who listens more than she talks. As an outsider, you're positioned to see, hear, and feel more than your prospect if you're willing to open yourself to it. So today I'm going to show you how to become a better problem finder with the help of a few negotiation tactics and a sprinkling of tactical empathy. A great foundation for some serious problem finding always begins with active listening. Active listening always begins and ends with the art of crafting relevant follow-up questions that clearly prove to the other side that you are paying attention. So here's a few tips for conjuring those great follow-up questions. Number 1, leverage open-ended questions. Not yes or no oriented questions, but lovely open-ended questions that ignite conversation. Number 2, go for no as opposed to yes, and I will explain in a moment what that means. And number 3, learn to shut up more and embrace a little or a lot of awkward silence. So the first one, always try to go for open-ended as opposed to closed-ended questions. A yes or no question eliminates the possibility of capturing valuable and sometimes wonderfully rambling information. Yes or no questions can also imply or give the impression that you're gunning for the sale as opposed to reaching that collaborative agreement. The common sales phrase is get to yes, right? We all know that one. But the problem with pushing for a hard and fast yes often results in an inauthentic counterfeit yes, which of course is not ideal. So most of us have a series of canned discovery questions that we ask our clients when we're first getting to know each other. These questions might include, what are some of your key performance indicators? Where do you see the company in 3 years' time? These are great conversation starter questions, and they encourage lots of context and additional explanation. This is a good one. Instead of going for yes, try to get them to say no instead. This is weird. Hear me out. What's interesting and so much more impactful about no is that there's a sense of safety and an inherent protection in the word no. When we say no to a question, we actually feel grounded and safe and uncommitted. We don't always like to hear the word no, of course, but saying no in a situation when it's important to feel in control can make all the difference in how a negotiation plays out. So on the flip side of that, when we say yes to something, which we already know salespeople are trying to get to anyway, so we have our haunches up, we can also feel like every additional piece of information that we provide following that yes is another commitment to be made. So when we guide our counterpart to a place where they can say no, it anchors them in safety and control. So when they offer information after that no, the other side is free of attached strings or additional commitment. And what I like to do before getting to that no, and I'm going to show you some examples of this as well. What I like to do is create a feedback loop, which is a summary of the things they've already said. I just put it into my own words. What this does is this shows empathy and that you're further validating their concerns. And I combine the summation with a no-centric question. So an example of this might be, it sounds like you're really passionate about what you do. I'm hearing you say that you want to make more money, but I'm also hearing you in that you feel a need to give back to the community. Do you disagree? A lot of us are used to asking questions like, is this a good idea? Or do you agree? But you could flip it back very simply and ask, is this a ridiculous idea? Or do you disagree? It takes some practice and it feels very weird in the beginning, but by prompting the other side to say no, you're helping to subconsciously ease their fear of commitment and you're forging trust in the process. Now, don't forget to shut up once in a while, right? Silence is powerful and it can be awkward and it takes a lot of practice. Many of us have the temptation to fill the silence and blather on and on. I certainly do. I'm very guilty of this. There's uncertainty and discomfort in silence. So we want to fill in the cracks with lots of words and explanations, but resist the urge to do this. Silence gives your counterpart a chance to think, reflect, and react, and to expand and build clarity around the potential agreement that you're both trying to reach. So in conclusion, consider listening twice as much as you speak. Again, this is very hard and takes tons of practice, but this approach allows you to pick up on mannerisms and read a room much more effectively. And bonus, it's also going to leave a much better impression on your counterpart as a result. All right, so your initial conversation is over. You've unearthed an interesting problem that, once managed, will have a larger impact on the success of your counterpart. They're excited to move forward, but now you need to get a commitment from the other side. This means landing on a price and terms that are aligned with the value and expertise that you and your team bring to the project. Of course, you're going to continue to use your active listening techniques, but now you're also entering the next phase, which is the negotiation. We are all in a negotiation most of the time, if not all of the time. Anytime you or your counterpart says, I want or I need, you are in a negotiation. If you're a parent like me, this can happen multiple times throughout the day. Am I right, parents? Anytime you're trying to influence the behavior of your kids or convince your partner that they're loading the dishwasher in an obviously inferior fashion, you're negotiating with them to embrace a different approach and to reach a beneficial solution for both sides. When entering any kind of negotiation, it's imperative that you remind yourself that this is not a win-lose situation. It's not. It's not a win-lose. In fact, your adversary in all of this is the problem or hurdle itself, not your counterpart. You'll be much better off if you come from a place of collaboration. I'm going to share some deceptively powerful tools to help you get there. These approaches will not only force you to slow down, but be a better listener and encourage your client to view the conversation from a new perspective. Negotiation is the art of letting the other side have your way. And your main job, once you've entered a negotiation, to listen and gently guide the trajectory of the conversation. Now, we've already covered active listening, which has hopefully served you well up to this point. And certainly you'll want to keep those tactics close at hand. But as you get closer to reaching an agreement, I've found the following 3 techniques to be very effective and conducive to collaboration. These techniques include mirroring, labeling, and calibrated questioning. And each of these approaches do 2 very important things. They demonstrate understanding while simultaneously buying you time to hone your response. Allow me to explain. So let's start with mirroring. Now, this concept is ridiculously easy, like kind of stupid easy. So simple, you might be tempted to completely write it off at first. Mirroring is when you repeat the last 2 to 4 words back to your counterpart in an open and inquisitive manner. So my client might say, I'm having a tough time wrapping my head around your proposed budget. And I might say, proposed budget? Yeah, the $30K that your team estimated to build out this campaign, we're working with a limited budget. You have a limited budget? Yeah, well, there's other factors and departments that we need to take into consideration. We'll need to open up conversations with them in order to move forward. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. This is such a valuable technique because they're going to be encouraged to elaborate and provide additional context that then you can use. Also, with the right tone of voice, which is important. Tone of voice is, it needs to be inquisitive and it needs to be kind and gentle. They're going to be, with the right tone of voice and coming from a place of genuine curiosity, they're going to realize that you're working with them, not against them. Mirroring solidifies the fact that you are listening to them, and it allows you to tease out information in a gentle and inquisitive manner. It can also help with the tendency that many of us have to fill the silence. It encourages the other side to expand and divulge valuable additional information. So let's keep this theoretical conversation about budget in mind as we usher in the second negotiation technique, which is called labeling. Simply put, labeling is a verbal observation, which also supports active listening, of course. Labeling is exactly how it sounds. You are paraphrasing and or acknowledging something on the other side of the table. Now, the trick to labeling is that it always begins with, it seems like, it looks like, it sounds like, or it feels like. Now, notice these statements avoid the use of I, as in, I feel like, or what I'm hearing is. That's because once you make these first-person statements, there's actually a self-centering component that you want to leave out of the mix. It's what's considered a pattern interrupt, and you want to avoid throwing a wrench in the conversation flow. So again, the other side is showing a little hesitation around the project budget that you've proposed. You could now say something like, it sounds like you need a little time to touch base with the other departments in your company in order to get clarity around your budgetary constraints. Am I completely off base here? And they might say, no, you're not completely off base. So if active listening and negotiation had a baby, the result would be this next technique, calibrated questioning. Calibrated questions help you to extract information while also giving the other side the illusion of control. Because again, at its very core, negotiation is the art of letting the other side have your way. Calibrated questions are open-ended and are calibrated in that they begin with the words what and how. First of all, people love to be asked what to do and how to do something. It makes them feel in control. Some of us might be tempted to use the word why. We're often told to find our why and help others to identify and achieve their why, which is great and super foundational from a brand perspective. But in a negotiation setting, when you ask someone why, it can feel a little bit accusatory. In fact, why can trigger a defensive reaction. It implies blame, it can, and a little bit of criticism. So asking why can actually interfere with your rapport and should be avoided. But beginning a question with what and how takes the sting and potential defensiveness out of the question. So instead of asking my prospect, why do you think a new website is what your company needs right now? Why is this a good idea? I could say, how will a new website lead to an increase in sales for your company? What specific benefits are you looking to achieve? These are both perfectly reasonable sets of questions, but the second is softer and a bit more introspective and a lot less likely to put your counterpart on the defensive. Now, I want to illustrate this for you one more time and attempt to bring it all together because I think it's important for you guys to understand the flow of how these conversations might go down. So remember, the goal is to first build rapport through active listening and give your counterpart ample opportunity and encourage them to fill the gaps and the space in the conversation. So that's number one. Then ask key open-ended questions that allow you to identify a valuable problem that you and your team are very well positioned to solve. Now I'm going to set the scene for another imaginary conversation with myself, which is super fun. Obviously, this is going to be a truncated conversation that would usually happen over a series of hours or a number of meetings, depending on your process. But I want to bring it all together for you guys as best I can so you can get a sense of the flow. All right, so a quick overview here. I know that there are quite a few WordPress folks in the group, so let's pretend that a local life coach has approached me to redesign her website. This woman's name is Jill. She's in her mid-50s, and she has 10 plus years of experience under her belt. Jill has a solid recurring client base, but her business has come to an almost grinding halt as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Traffic has dropped by 50%, and her practice is hurting because most of her sessions happen within an in-person group setting. Jill has decided that a redesign is the answer, and for good reason. Her site is old, it's slow loading, it looks terrible on mobile, right? It's a basic brochure site. In her mind, a redesign is necessary because it's going to provide a way to capture leads and build interest while she waits for the pandemic to pass. In her mind, the pandemic is the problem, and this new website is the solution. So I will be on the left-hand side of the screen, indicated by a T because my name is Tara. So I'm going to be on the left, Jill will be on the right. And I'm going to try to walk you guys through how this conversation will go. So me to Jill. Jill, it's so good to chat and learn more about your business. I know that the last few months have been really hard. I'm curious, what is it about these in-person meetings that make them so critical to your practice? Open-ended question. Then Jill might say something like, these in-person meetings are key. The program is built off of these interpersonal relationships. Eye contact and body language and connectedness is at the very core of my program. So what sort of time commitment and preparation do these meetings require? Open-ended question number 2. It's a lot of work in the beginning. I build out a full curriculum, but once that work is done, it's fairly straightforward. I'm teaching, running helpful workshops, and then letting my attendees lead the conversation. Third open-ended question. What kinds of changes have you considered that would allow you to pivot in this pandemic environment? Well, I meet some clients over Zoom, but my entire practice is really built on my ability to meet in person with my group. So I'm hoping things will get back to normal soon. This could use a bit more exploration, don't you think? So now I'm going to create a feedback loop and summarize what we talked about, and then also try to get Jill to say no. Because remember, there's protection and an inherent feeling of comfort in the word no. So it sounds like you have a really nice foundation of group coaching content ready to go. It also sounds like personal connection is key to the success of your program and the longevity of your practice. Do you disagree? No, I don't disagree. Silence. Embrace the dynamic silence. This is probably the hardest part, right? Mirroring. So Jill, after the silence, is going to say, I just can't imagine running these sessions 100% virtually. It's so disconnected and impersonal. Disconnected and impersonal? Yeah, you really just can't give the group individual attention very easily on Zoom, Plus you have the tech difficulties and the confusion. It's really overwhelming. It sounds like you have some frustration with the video chat setting, which I totally get, but you're also committed to maintaining the same level of intimacy and support that you've been able to provide in the past. That's right. What would it feel like if you could continue to provide this training with the similar level of connectedness with your clients? What if your program moved to a more intimate virtual space that's automated, complete with simple tech training for your attendees? Well, I suppose that would feel amazing and solve a lot of problems. I guess I could potentially help more people. Calibrated question and getting to know. Well, what if, as opposed to a website redesign, we created thoughtful online courses that people could subscribe to? From there, you could schedule video on a smaller basis with small groups and chat and have regular chat check-ins. Then you could transition to in-person sessions once the COVID crisis is passed. Is this an unreasonable suggestion? No, not unreasonable at all. Tell me more. And that concludes another episode of Conversations Tara has with herself. So I hope that was helpful and not totally weird. And it's going to take a lot of practice. The mastery of these techniques do not happen overnight. You're going to need to apply it in ways that suits your communication style, of course, and fits well within your process. But remember also, with regards to practice, if it doesn't feel awkward, then you're just not doing it right. Awkwardness and discomfort equals change. It means you're learning and pushing yourself to be better. So what's worked for me is to practice in situations with very low stakes. So for instance, the barista at my local favorite coffee shop, or practicing on my kids, which is actually really fun. That's an easy one. That's low stakes. You need to find a judgment-free zone. And if the conversation goes south for whatever reason or gets weird, you can abort the mission and try again tomorrow. So let's recap. Ultimately, the goal is you want to get to a place of problem finding, as I mentioned at the top of this presentation, as opposed to the run-of-the-mill problem solving. This, of course, takes a healthy mindset shift but is well worth it, as it's going to set you apart and differentiate your brand and underscore your heightened level of service. And you achieve problem finding through active listening techniques, which include going for those open-ended questions in the beginning, getting to know instead of yes, and embracing that dynamic silence. Put it all together and you have yourself a recipe for positive and productive conversation, which will lead to more sales and way better clients. Once you've identified the problem, you're on to negotiation and building rapport. The focus here is to hash out terms, finalize an agreement, and guide your counterpart to an authentic yes. And you achieve this through mirroring, labeling, and asking calibrated follow-up questions. And that is it for me. And I want to thank you all so much for attending. This was really awesome and such a fantastic opportunity. At this URL, you can download a booklet which we've created, which provides a nice overview of the techniques I touched on today. In addition to, there's a bonus 10 compelling open-ended questions that you can use in your next client meeting. Also, if you enjoyed this presentation, I'd love to invite you all to join my Alchemy Business Accelerator group in Facebook. I also host webinars. Sometimes April pops in, which is awesome. She was just on yesterday. So it's all about building a tribe, helping each other, sharing resources. And that's it. And I just want to say, have an amazing rest of your day, you guys. This is going to be such an awesome day, chock full of all kinds of good stuff. And April, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Totally our pleasure, Tara. Thank you so much. And everybody, Tara's going to be in the Facebook group for a few minutes answering questions. And so go over there if you've not gone over there, if you've not against the remote control live Facebook group, and we will see you there. All right. Thank you again, Tara.
Yep. Bye.